Okay, welcome. So tonight's shir is called "Understanding Haman's Jewish Problem," but I think it's more a shir about the general phenomenon of anti-Semitism and a unique insight in it that happens to give us some insight into the way Haman sees the Jewish people. But I owe, first of all, a tremendous debt of gratitude to Rabbi Yehoshua Hartman. Rabbi Yehoshua Hartman is an expert on the Maharal. The Maharal was an Achron. He lived about 400 years ago. He's somebody that is known for having opened up the works of Chazal. If you have a Gemara, a piece of Agada that is very difficult to decipher, or something like that, so the Maharal usually would give a very beautiful explanation for it. And in terms of machshava, how to think as a Jew, that's very much his domain. That's something that the Maharal wrote extensively about, but at the same time a lot of his works are, I guess, very esoteric, hard to make a reading of. Rabbi Yehoshua Hartman, who lives in the UK right now, I believe, so he is responsible for making these really nice editions from Machon Yerushalayim of works of the Maharal. There are fantastic footnotes that just really go through tremendous length in explaining what the Maharal meant in a way that it's much more readable. And many of these books actually you can find in HebrewBooks.org. Usually the nicer editions are the ones that are hard to find for free online. For the most part, you can find these online. So I wanted to talk about just a shir that I heard from him, that primarily he put these ideas together. A lot of his stories we'll talk about also during this class. But I wanted to start off with something that's a little bit current also. You have a quote at the beginning of your source sheet. It's a quote by journalist Daniel Pearl. Daniel Pearl was a Jew, not observant to my knowledge. He was a journalist for the Wall Street Journal, and he was captured while reporting in Pakistan by Muslim terrorists. They actually took a video. It's rather gruesome. You could, if you try, I don't recommend it, find it online. You could find the video of his captors taking him, forcing him to say various things that I imagine he didn't mean. But before they beheaded him on camera, so he said the following. He said, "My father is Jewish, my mother is Jewish, I am Jewish." That was right before he was beheaded in 2002, and then the video actually shows that. It's very gruesome. Does anybody know why this is in the news recently?
Ed Koch's tombstone.
Right. Ed Koch, the former mayor of New York, also a Jew. He passed away 2 weeks ago, I think, something like that. And even well before he passed away, he decided that these words of Daniel Pearl is what he wanted on his tombstone. That in addition to another statement also. Do you know what the second statement was?
I forget, it was a small print.
Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad.
What?
Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad.
That's what he wants in his tombstone?
So first this quote by Daniel Pearl.
On his tombstone.
Right, and then Shema Yisrael. That's Ed Koch's tombstone. It was ready to go even I think before they buried him.
Yes.
So he definitely thought about this in advance.
Daniel Pearl was married to a non-Jew? No?
He may have been. He was not an observant Jew.
No, I know that, but I think, didn't Ed Koch date Beth Meyerson? Didn't he date the first Miss America?
Yeah, he dated her, but they never got married.
No?
They never got
married. It's okay, but she was Jewish.
Oh, I see.
Oh, okay.
The first Miss America was Jewish.
Well, Ed Koch was a very proud Jew, and this quote that he wanted to put on his tombstone, he felt touched at a certain element that he wanted to really to be his epitaph. And these words, they make you think about what it means to actually be Jewish. In fact, in 2002, when this quote was originally stated by Daniel Pearl, when it was captured on film, Daniel Pearl's parents actually compiled a book called "I Am a Jew." I think "I Am a Jew." It was an anthology.
What was Jewish? I don't know. I haven't. I don't. Right? Yeah.
It was an anthology of I think 100 people, 100 major Jewish voices.
Ed Koch's contribution, it was rejected.
Yeah, Ed Koch had a contribution. It was rejected. They didn't like what he had to say. But they realized, and that's what was the springboard for making this book, is that when you make a statement like Daniel Pearl did, that's something that makes you think, what exactly is Jewish identity? What's it about? And when you think about that, also, why do people hate us for it? That's definitely something that's on our minds when we think about Ed Koch, about Daniel Pearl, and I think it's something to think about when we get into the discussion about Purim. So I wanted to start with a Gemara in Shabbos. It's well known. It's one that many view as capturing the essence of the holiday, or at least what the take-home message is. So the Gemara says, "Vayisiatzvu b'tachti sahar." This is last week's part, 2 weeks ago's parsha, that the Jewish people stood b'tachtis. You could usually translate to mean at the foot of, but that would be a literal translation. A literal translation would be that they stood at the underneath the mountain. So going with that way of speech that the Torah has, the Gemara says, "Amar Rav Avdimi bar Chama bar Chasa." Rav Avdimi bar Chama says, "Malamid shekafa HaKadosh Baruch Hu aleim es hahar kegigis." You learn from this that God took the mountain and lifted it over their heads like a barrel, in a manner of threatening. So Amar lahem, and he said to them, "Im atem mekabel maTorah mutav." If you're going to accept this Torah of mine, great. I'm going to put the mountain down, and you guys will be fine. Ve'im lav, but if you won't accept the Torah, sham teit kuvaraschem. So literally you translate this as there, but it sounds more like here will be your burial. I mean, you could get into what the word sham is doing there, but we'll leave that for another time perhaps. But God says, if you don't accept the Torah, I'm dumping this mountain on your head, you're all going to die. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, "Mikan moda Rabba lo reisa." That gives us a big excuse. We have, how do they translate it in the Sansino? A strong protest against the Torah, that we have a claim that, let's say you go to Shamayim and you get in trouble for all the bad things you did, all of the various mitzvahs in the Torah that you didn't keep, you could say, you forced it on me. I didn't actually want to take this in the first place. In terms of legal complaints, that actually is a valid one in various Dinei Mamanos, financial cases in Torah law, that if a person claims they forced me to write my signature, I didn't really want to append my word to this document at all, so that's something that is a valid claim. So similarly here, you could claim that we were forced to take the Torah, we shouldn't be responsible for it at all. Amar Rava says, Afal Pichein, even though that's the case, might have been a good claim back then, Hider Kiblu Abimei Achashverosh, they re-accepted the Torah willingly, it seems, during the days of Achashverosh, during the days of the Purim story. For it's written, Kima v'kiblu haYehudim, that the Jewish people, they had fulfilled and accepted. What exactly is that referring to? If you look at the basic words of the Psukim, it sounds like they accepted the institution of the holiday of Purim. But at the same time, the language is a little strange, that we fulfilled and accepted. The order we would think is a little different. We accepted it, and then we fulfilled it. So the strange order is noted by the Gemara, and it says, Kimu masha kiblu kavar. They confirmed that which they accepted long before. At first, where they accepted something that they had actually fulfilled for years in the past. That's referring to the Torah as a whole at Har Sinai. Whereas originally they were forced into it, we're saying. After the Purim story took place, the Jewish people decided, we do want this after all, willingly, of our own accord. So we could ask two questions from this. So first of all, what happened on Purim that changed everything? I think that's the most basic question. We had a miracle, okay, so that's certainly something that inspires us. But what makes this miracle of Purim, or especially when you deal with a hidden miracle that takes place in the Purim story, what makes that so much more convincing? What makes that bring us to a point where we want to accept the Torah more so than all the other more open miracles? Or even if you think about Har Sinai, when the Jews were actually redeemed from Egypt, Yetzias Mitzrayim, they'd gone through a lot of miracles, and that didn't seem to do the job, and now all of a sudden Purim does it. So what takes place all of a sudden in the Purim story? And second question is, what's the notion about forcing the Torah on the Jewish people in the first place? Why would I think that that's unnecessary? Any thoughts?
So there must be. So there's a weakness in the Jewish people. That's in both points, at Har Sinai and here in Purim,
okay.
Right? So at Har Sinai, they left Egypt, and there's some weaknesses that led to eventually to the golden calf. So there's some inner weaknesses to them. And here in Purim, I mean, there was a move to assimilation and less at the time. Some other issues that the strength of people's connection to Yiddishkeit wasn't as strong as it should be.
So that'd be a reason I would think that they wouldn't accept it in those days.
Well, why they needed something to wake them up is an extra push, either a mountain on top of them or Haman coming along and threatening to destroy them.
We want to be religious, but right now we're having trouble, so let's re-accept the Torah. Renewal vows.
But because something happened, right?
Uh-huh.
And what happened is Har Sinai, they had a mountain on top of them, so that was a little bit of pressure. And here at Purim, they had Haman, putting the death threat on top of them, right? So that and being saved from that. So being saved twice, being saved at Har Sinai and being saved here at Purim. moves people to have a closer connection to
Sure.
Torah.
Definitely when we experience miracles, when we experience salvation, that makes us want to accept more. But I would even ask, even in the times of the giving of the Torah, did they really not accept the Torah? We just learned in yesterday's parsha, Na'aseh v'nishma.
Right.
We will do and we will listen. The Jews were very, very enthusiastic about accepting the Torah. Why is this even necessary
Maybe
back
it wasn't
then?
a threat. Maybe it was just saying, if you don't accept the Torah, you're not going to have life. So like they say at the end of the Torah,
It's Chaim he.
Rather than, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's a threat. Is it a threat?
This sounds like a much more direct threat. It might be that your life will be meaningless, it won't be great if you don't have the Torah, and we love the Torah and all that. But a mountain dropping on your head is much more sudden, and much more, I guess, effective at making a life end.
Well, I don't know about the Achashverosh part, but the first part of Har Sinai, you could say that, going on with Dr. Jensen saying that deep down they really wanted to do the right thing, but there's so many uncertainties involved. They couldn't necessarily take themselves to that next level by themselves. And so Hashem took the mountain, forced it over them. And then the Na'aseh v'nishma shows you how much they really deep down did want to do it, just they had certain uncertainties holding them back, even though they should have had obviously full bitachon. But
so there is an extra push that the mountain is doing.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's definitely true. And what exactly that extra push is, that's something that I'd like to explore with you. It's the Maharal's approach, understanding what exactly happened here at Har Sinai, and once we have an understanding of what this mountain holding over our head experience was meant to accomplish, then we might have a better idea of what actually happens in Purim. That might give us a new understanding. Okay. Rabbi Hartman also tells a story about when he was younger, how he was learning Becharusa with a Baal Tshuva, somebody who was fresh off the boat, somebody who was not familiar with various things that we grew up learning perhaps during our childhood or other points in our life. And he says, I want to learn Chumash with you. Rabbi Hartman says, great. What should we learn? I want to start from Bereshis. Okay. So I don't know if Bereshis is a good idea, because Bereshis is, there's a lot of esoteric ideas there. We talk about the fact, original sin. It's very complicated. Maybe let's skip Bereshis for now. That's not the best idea of where to start. So, do you want to start from Noach? The guy says, no, I don't want to start from Noach. Noach is, he's not Jewish. No, I want to start from the Jews. If we're not going to start from the very beginning, let's start from the story about the Jewish people. So Rabbi Hartman says, okay, so let's go to Lech Lecha. Let's start with the story about Abraham. The guy says, great, let's start from Lech Lecha. And they go very slowly. They start Lech Lecha Mi'artzecha, your second source. And I only bring this really to emphasize, I bring you source 2 really only to emphasize what's not there. Right? You have the beginning of the introduction of Lech Lecha. Really, in the previous parsha, Abraham is introduced. They talk about his traveling to Haran. But right after you talk about Abraham being spoken to by God, go to Israel, and you're going to become a great nation, and a lot of other good things. So this fellow, after learning that pasuk, says, tell me, Rabbi Hartman, was Abraham a tzaddik? Was he a righteous man? Rabbi Hartman said, of course he was. He was great. He introduced monotheism into the world. He is a chesed champion. He did a lot of great things, and we're very proud of him. So the guy starts looking back in the Chumash. So where are all these stories? Where does it say that he did all of these things? And Rabbi Hartman realized, oh, it's not there. No, it's all in Torah Shabbal Peh. It's all in the Midrashim. Really, it's all in a lot of these stories about Abraham are in the Zohar. And he says, you're not going to find it there. So this Baal Tshuva, he said, well, why don't we have any introduction to who this person is in Torah Shabbat? And Torah Shabbal Peh. Let's say I want to accept that. We believe in Torah Shabbal Peh. Fine. But at the same time, in Mikra Yotze Midei Pshuto, that the basic meaning of the text is not supposed to be void of any meaning on its own merit. And because of that, he's wondering, Rabbi Hartman, what's the deal with not having any introduction to Abraham whatsoever? So the Ramban actually asks this question, and he suggests that the whole story about Abraham becoming, the champion of monotheism would require getting involved in the competing viewpoints in the world, and that would be something that is not something we want to put into print. So the Ramban said that's why we don't get into who Abraham was in his earlier stages in life. But the Maharal, he doesn't accept that answer. And the reason why is because if you look at source 3, the Maharal says, we have an ability to characterize and introduce a character in very short form. And if you don't want to get into the details, fine. But let's say Noach, right before that. How do I know Noach was a tzaddik? How do I know that he was supposed to be saved and put in a teva? Why did he find favor in God's eyes? The Torah says he was a tzaddik, he was a righteous guy. So why can't you tell me that just as easily by Avraham Avinu? So that's the question that this Baal Tshuva asked. It's not something that we would typically think to ask, because very often, you have somebody that first, steps into Lech Lecha, actually looking at Torah Shebechtav for the first time. That's when they've already been brought up in school, having heard all the Midrashim, having heard all of the stories about Avraham, and you feel like you know him already.
Right.
But if you have somebody that comes to Chumash fresh for the first time, so this will be much more striking. Who's this Avraham guy? Why are we learning? Why are we just not being introduced to him at all? And out of the blue, God is speaking to him. God is choosing him. The rest of Tanakh is about Avraham and his people. What did he do to deserve all this? So the Maharal, he brings up an idea which somewhat echoes source 4. You have a Mishnah in Avos. This is a famous Mishnah. Kol avashi tuluya b'davar, batal davar b'tela ha'ava. If you have a loving relationship between two individuals, but it's dependent on something, so then if that matter in which the relationship is dependent on, if it ceases to exist, the relationship falls apart. But if you have a love which is not dependent on anything, it's something which is a unconditional love, so then you can't take anything away to remove that relationship. It's always going to be there. So the Maharal says the reason why we're not introduced to Abraham's tzidkus, his righteousness at all, prior to him being chosen as the father of the Jewish nation, it's to hit home the point that Abraham's being chosen has nothing to do with him being a tzaddik. Sounds very strange at first, but he elaborates. But the Maharal says basically that chas v'shalom, if the Torah was to have introduced to us that Abraham was a tzaddik, because if he had been introduced as such, that would make this relationship couched in terms that make it conditional, that make it tuluya b'davar. What would happen if one day Abraham's descendants are no longer tzaddikim, are no longer righteous people? And sad to say, I think we've definitely had periods of that in our history. One could argue now also, we're not tzaddikim. So what happens to that relationship if it's something that's tuluya b'davar, if it's something that's dependent on our being tzaddikim?
Doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist.
So why was that okay by Noah?
Noach's not chosen anymore. We don't view Noach's progeny as being chosen.
So that was a weakness in Noah.
Or at least in the way that Hashem wanted to relate to Noach, in the relationship that he wanted to forge with Noach. Not necessarily an inherent flaw in Noach, but Hashem didn't want to commit, I suppose, as much.
Just that there is that intro, and it does say that he was a tzaddik. So that preface is there for him.
For Noach, right. So he was chosen because he was a tzaddik. But his future generations, or if Noach himself was to all of a sudden stop being a tzaddik, would Hashem still have chosen him?
Right.
Is Hashem still maintaining a relationship with Noach? Not necessarily.
Right.
But the Maharal says with Avraham that relationship is not going to be broken. It's not based on deeds whatsoever.
So what is it based on? Why was he chosen?
It's a good question. And in many of the works of the Maharal, he says, I have no idea. Ask God. The one book that I have here, Netzach Yisrael, Perek Yud Aleph, so the Maharal does get into ideas that start to toe that line of perhaps saying that the Jews have some kind of racial advantage, right? That racial advantage. You're getting into controversial things here. I don't think this is necessarily politically incorrect. I'll tell you basically what he says in a nutshell is that he feels that the Jewish people have a certain, inherent ability or connection to Torah, that the Jewish people as a whole, for whatever reason, he can't necessarily go into the mechanics as to why this is the case, but the Maharal feels that Torah is something that uniquely speaks to the Jewish people and doesn't speak quite as much to the rest of the world. Does that mean that the rest of the world is inferior in every way, that they're horrible people? No, not necessarily. That means that the Jews have a certain degree of responsibility based on the fact that with regards to Torah, they might have better abilities in one way or another. But that doesn't mean that Jews are better in all other aspects of life, or that other people of the world don't have their job and their role to play in the world. But with regards to Torah, the Maharal thinks that the Jewish people they have a unique relationship.
But he may be prejudiced, right?
I imagine, right? Being a Jew, that's certainly a possibility. But that's where he's coming from, and he claims that Abraham was chosen not for any behavioral actions, the things that he did, but because he had a certain potential within him, one that apparently carries on to all of his children afterwards. That's
Yeah,
the
that
Maharal's
mountain
approach.
thing is even more confusing than why would God want to hold it over our heads?
Very good point.
If we're kind of connected.
Before we start connecting all these different ideas together, I just want to complete the
It's
thought.
kind of nice, actually,
Yeah.
to think of it that way.
Well, the special characteristic of Abraham would be God-given anyway.
Sorry,
Just understand the question.
The
question
special
again?
characteristic of Abraham
Mm-hmm.
would anyway be God-given. Huh?
Okay, it's God-given. I don't see that as a problem. No, that God gave him that ability, and yeah, he's being chosen because of it. Sure, whatever abilities we have, that God gives us those abilities, and He makes demands of us to use them properly. I think that works. But at the same time, something that's very difficult with all of this is, with this approach, is it sounds like if Avraham was a jerk, that Hashem would still choose him. That's what it sounds like. Right? If it's not based on deeds, if it's not based on Avraham being a tzaddik, so does that mean to say that if Avraham was a criminal, a horrible person, a murderer, that he would have still been chosen by God?
No.
Why not?
Well, he was a Sadiq, but I don't know. I'm already. But you've already introduced the other idea of. I think it was Rabbi Hartman's idea that he wanted to choose him, but he just didn't want us to know that he was chosen because he was a Sadiq. So.
I don't know if it's that he doesn't want us to know. It's that it actually was not the reason why we were chosen.
That wasn't the reason.
So you could argue that it was a reason, right? And it's just not one that's emphasized in the Psukim because Hashem doesn't want us to think
That was the only.
that's the basis.
Yeah.
But the Maharal actually takes it all the way, and he says that no, Avram was not chosen because he was a tzaddik, at all. At the same time, though, the Maharal points out, if Avram was not a tzaddik, the relationship would not have actually formed. And you could give a mashal to really explain this phenomenon, that there could be, I guess, something that is crucial to build a relationship off of, but at the same time, it's not why the relationship exists.
Give and take. You need both sides to do their part.
Okay, but that's after a relationship's given. We're going to do good by each other. But how does that relationship start in the first place? So Rabbi Hartman gave a mashal. He told us, imagine you're young. Well, we were Yeshiva Bakrim at the time. I was in Israel when I heard this shir. And he says, imagine somebody suggests to you a shidduch. A girl, she's beautiful, she has great midos, she's a fantastic person. But her health, there's something to be lacking. Her blood pressure, normal blood pressure is 120 over 80. Her blood pressure is 1800 over 1200. She's a walking time bomb. She could blow any minute. Tell me, would you be interested in such a shidduch? So your answer would probably be no. All the other milas are great, that's fantastic, but a girl that might not even make it through the first date is not something you're really interested in. Okay, so I said, fine. Now take that same girl, all the milos again, but now perfect, healthy, great blood pressure and all that. Now are you interested? So yeah, of course you're interested in eventually you meet this girl, you go on a date, things go great, and you end up marrying her. Eventually when you come to give your speech at your engagement party, you say, my Kala, she's got perfect blood pressure. She's great. She's fantastic. That's why I love her. Right? You would never say that.
Sorry, I missed it.
But you could have that all of a sudden, there could be something that's a deal breaker. Right? I'm not going to start going out with a girl if her blood pressure is, through the roof. But if her blood pressure is good, and then I date her and everything works out well, I would never say that the reason why this relationship is working is because, she's got great blood pressure. That's not why I love her. That's not why I want this relationship to progress.
Okay.
There could be something that is a requirement, a prerequisite. Well, at the same time, it's not the reason for the relationship.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
I really felt like it's necessary, but not sufficient.
It's not sufficient, yes. But I would say even more, let's say after that relationship begins, this is now me extending the mashal a little bit further, after the relationship begins, then all of a sudden one's wife her health takes a turn for the worse. Right? That it would be the height of cruelty to say, well, okay, I liked you before, but now you're not so healthy, so forget it. Right? There, to start off a relationship.
That's dependent on something. That's
absolutely.
Other
right.
quote.
Now, it might be to start such a relationship, you need that element, but it doesn't have to be there afterwards. Right, so that's the Maharal thinks that's what's going on with the tzidkus, the righteousness of Abraham. That Abraham had to be a tzaddik to initially be chosen, but at the same time, and the Torah attests to this by not mentioning Abraham's tzidkus at all, that God chooses Abraham, nothing to do with his tzidkus. That's not the reason why this relationship exists, and that's not the reason why this relationship will continue to exist in the future. What do you think the Maharal is coming to exclude? when he points this out. That with regards to the Jewish people, irrespective of our deeds, we're still the chosen people. Any idea who he's coming to exclude?
I'm sorry?
Who is he coming to exclude? When he says the Jewish people are chosen irrespective of their deeds, nothing we do is going to destroy that relationship.
And so now you think he's excluding someone?
He's excluding a group.
Oh,
yes.
A group?
He's excluding a group.
A group?
Or a claim, perhaps.
Amalek or Esau.
It's going to tie into Purim at some point. So Amalek would be a good guess, but and I'm thinking later in history. Think about the people who the Maharal is living amongst in Prague.
Spanish, no.
Reform.
Not Reform. Reform didn't say yet.
Karaites.
Not Karaites.
What?
Huh?
Oh, Skala?
Yashka.
Yoshka. Oh, Yoshka.
Christianity. Supersessionist theory.
Okay.
What was their claim? Christianity's claim was that the Jewish people, they were the chosen people, but after they didn't follow Jesus, they didn't. God changed his mind, and now the Christian people are the chosen nation. The Jewish people are no longer that group. Now the Maharal has to say this all couched in nicer, more hidden terms, obviously, because if he was to say that in the middle of Prague, it would be sakanos nefashos to him. Although Rabbi Hartman also, who's again, he's an expert in Maharal, he could tell you in Hebrew University, he looked at the manuscripts. There is a line in Gevuros Hashem, another one of the Maharal's works, where he writes, and this should be an answer to all of our Christian, neighbors who claim that we were replaced. Obviously, that didn't make it into print for obvious reasons. But the Maharal was coming from that perspective of trying to display and explain why the Jewish people are still the chosen nation. Okay. But when you get this idea, and the reason why I'm doing this, it's a point of departure to really focus on the idea that there are two elements to the Jewish people. It's what we are and what we do. Who we are, what we do, the element of what we do, we try to be good Jews. We come to Shiurim, we daven, we do various mitzvahs. We want to be good Jews, and that's something that is that's very much a part of us. It's a crucial component of our identity. But then there's also the aspect of who we are, something that has nothing to do with what we do. Just like Abraham Avinu, his being chosen had nothing to do with his actions, but who he is. There's an element of our identity that's unchangeable, irrespective of what we do, and God is saying, when he gives us that aspect of our identity, he says, with all due respect, I'm choosing you no matter what. No matter what you do, no matter how much you try to get out of this relationship, no matter how much you assimilate, you're a Jew. You're still the chosen nation, you're still my people. Now why is that? Why is it that we can't renounce Judaism?
Well, also creates a question with converts, no?
Also, converts can bring themselves into the fold. That's definitely a possibility that we have.
So definitely they do, but what is it that they are?
So the Gemara describes when a convert comes in, he actually does get a new neshama. There is a change of their actual spiritual self. And I think there are midrashim that seem to indicate that the neshamos, the souls of the people that were at Har Sinai, not just that generation, but every generation, also included the converts of the Jewish people. That ultimately you can join the team. That's something that's a possibility. You can't leave it. And that's why if a convert decides to join, he can't say, I don't want to do this anymore. Forget it. That's not something that we have an option to do. Not something that a convert has an option to do. Now, why can't we renounce Judaism? How come if you can...
Is it in what you said about the answer for conversion, though? The fact that we're the same souls. We were 600,000 souls in
Possibly.
Sinai, and we're the same souls all the time. So we've already accepted the Torah.
I would definitely connect it there. That's talking on a very metaphysical, realm. I would say, why is it that there's a principle? If you look in source 5, just the main makor for a general principle that I'm sure you've heard of before, Yisrael afal pi shechata, Yisrael, that if a Jew sins, nevertheless he is a Jew, no matter what. Right? Why is that the case? How come I can't renounce Judaism? If I convert to every other religion in the world, it doesn't mean anything. From a halakhic perspective, you're still a Jew.
Because we're descendants of Abraham.
Okay. Why is that something that we can't do anything about? Why can't I break away from that chain? You're onto something.
Can you break away from your ancestors? Can you?
So no. Well, what are you thinking of? Why is it that you can't?
Blood is stronger than water. I don't know.
Like what you were saying before,
DNA.
that the Jews have I've gone towards Torah, and there's certain genes that were descended from which we
Uh-huh.
can't go away from.
There are things that we can't get away from.
Diseases to prove it, right?
Okay.
There's special,
Okay, so it's in our blood.
exact stuff.
I say that there are genetics, that we would say. I mean, we should point out that halakhically there is the concept of a person being watered down, so to speak, that they're no longer Jewish. If a person doesn't have a Jewish mother, they could have a Jewish father. They could have that blood in their system, so to speak, and they lose that identity.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
It's
true.
something spiritual, not physical.
So we're talking about something spiritual, for sure. But why is it conceptually that I can't get rid of
What
this
did he
identity?
say
Because
that
there's a
there? I
covenant.
will
There's a
bless
covenant
the-
between the entire
all
people,
the
There's a
families.
bris. Okay, there's a covenant. What exactly?
which is all encompassing. It's not just the nation, it's every individual within the nation.
Okay, but I don't want to be a part of that group. Why is that? Why am I not allowed to jump ship?
Well, you probably have to look back to how it started with Avram, because Avram also wasn't selected by choice. Like you're saying, like regardless of who he was, he got selected. So
I think you're all saying it. I think it's the general idea is that we have bechira, we have free choice to choose what we want to do, but we don't have bechira over what other people do. Right? We don't have the free choice to change what other people do to us. That's the big idea of the Maharal that he brings out here. He says, again, there are two aspects of our identity: what we do and who we are. Who we are is actually made up of not our own personal decisions necessarily, but also the decisions that other people make. You didn't choose to be born, right? That was the product of a choice of two other individuals. In the same way, God is the one that made us into Jews irreversibly. We can control, our own decisions, but we can't control the decisions that were made and actions that were taken to us. This is something that I was zocher to find in the diary of Anne Frank. I think she captures this well in source 6. She says, "Who has made us Jews different from all other people? Who has allowed us to suffer so terribly until now? It is God who has made us as we are, but it will be God too who will raise us up again." The next part of the next part is not really so necessary for this point, but Anne Frank realizes God is the one that made me a Jew. There's nothing I could do about it, because God is the one that ultimately made that decision. Now, when do you think this happened? When was this decision made by God? When did he decide to make us irreversibly Jews?
When he created the world, right? Didn't they say they created 10 things before, and one was the Torah, and
So the Torah is one of them?
Shmashos or something.
Okay.
So if he created the Torah, he must create who to give it to. No?
I don't know. I think if anything, we do have sources that would indicate that there was more of a divine plan that everybody in the world would be of this, level. That because of Chet of Adam Harishon and because of Migdal Babel, because of various stumblings that the world had, that's when all of a sudden Hashem had to say, all right, we got to consolidate. We have to, go with one nation right now to lead the rest of the world and hopefully bring everybody back to good.
So it must be Abraham then.
So Abraham's part of it, right? I would say also maybe source 1. Source 1 might also be a moment that is significant here. The Kava Aleim Har Kegigis moment, when God takes that har, that mountain, and says, you better accept this Torah or else. That is a moment where God actually forces Jewish identity upon us. Now, Midrashim can be taken literally, they might not be taken literally. Sometimes it'll depend on which Midrash you're looking at. Whatever you want to say here, whether this actually happened or not, this moment where God takes a mountain and holds it over our head, even if it didn't happen, I would suggest that in any event, something was done to the Jewish people at that moment.
Yeah.
What was it if it's not actually a mountain being held over our head?
It was the Torah being given. They heard God. They heard His voice.
Absolutely. I would say there was a historical moment that was crucial to how the world works. The Jewish people all of a sudden became a link in history that declares loudly to the rest of the world that God has a mission. He created the world, that He wants it to follow a certain plan, and a Jew, by his very identity, by being a part of this group or descendants of this group that was at Har Sinai, that itself, just by your identity, that expresses that message. That's something that I think God did to us in one way or another. And we said Na'aseh v'nishma, like we mentioned earlier. We accepted willfully the Torah at Har Sinai. But that didn't. But if it was just a willing acceptance, then that is our actions. That was something that we are doing. And it's something we're doing, so that's something that can fall away. That is something that's tuluya b'davar. If we're volunteers to accept the Torah, there might be a time later on where the Jewish people decide, I don't want to keep the Torah anymore. If somebody volunteers for a certain position, that usually means they're probably not going to stick it out, or at least it'll be much harder to, because there's a feeling of, if I'm a volunteer, if I did this because of my own decision, I can also decide to come out of it.
So why is it so important for us to stick it out?
So, well, you tell me. What do you think? Why do you think God thinks it's so important for us to stick this out?
Well, like you're saying, to be that representative for the rest of the world and lift the rest of the world up. But
Sounds good to me.
I just don't think that that's the only. I don't know. I think that's like a byproduct of it. I don't. That's the entire goal. I don't know. I think we're. I mean, like, we do have an effect on the world, but at the same time, we're kind. I like to think we're a little independent from their actions. Like, they have bechira, they make their choices, we make our choices.
For sure. But we have a role to hopefully bring the world in a general direction towards more of the positive. They have a free choice for sure. Just like a parent wants to, raise their child as best as they can, but at the same time it doesn't negate the fact that a child has bechira, that he has free will, and that he can choose to be a good boy or a bad boy. Michael, you had something?
Well, I don't know how you get from the holding the mountain over you to declaring your link in history.
So I think that what or either metaphorically or literally, this is now God doing an action to us.
But you think with such a seminal event it would be expressed that he would say
what exactly it means, that moment?
Yeah, you're now. I don't know what it would be because I haven't thought about it, but the idea of holding something over, the idea of a threat, doesn't seem the same as your idea of a declaration. I can't.
But keep in mind that this threat itself isn't even in the Torah. This threat of the mountain over our heads itself is in the Gemara.
Oh yeah.
There's really, Neil?
Doesn't explain that it was not. It's not. I'm concerned about you. I'm concerned about the future generations. So you have to commit the future generations to the Torah.
That link.
Okay.
And that's one of the explanations of the hanging of the mountain over the heart.
Absolutely. That's what the Maharal is saying. He says that you might want it now, and you might for the rest of your lives want it. And that's great, but later on your children might not. And the only way that they're going to be able to maintain their Jewish identity is if I force it upon them. And that's what this holding of the mountain over their heads was meant to accomplish.
Another question. Was the Erev Rav in Har Sinai?
I believe so. The Erev Rav, the rabble?
Oh, the rabble, yeah. They were.
Did it apply to them? No.
Why not?
Were they Jewish? No.
They were a part of the group. I think a lot of the Erev Rav was kind of weeded out with the various averos that the Jewish people as a whole did in the Midbar. But they were a part of that audience. They were, for sure. Okay.
But were they considered part of the Jewish nation?
I think so. I think this is the moment where the Jewish nation is being created in a more a national sense. Abraham, like we mentioned, at one point in history, something significant happens there. But at Har Sinai also, there's a big moment where the Jewish people are getting an irrevocable status as a nation, as a people. And if they're included in that group, then they're, and they're there. So, yeah, they're a part of it. They might not last much longer. They might get weeded out, like we mentioned. But at the same time, yes, they were a part of that group. So again, there's this relationship of who we are and what we do, right? Who we are is very much defined by the actions that others do to us, or the fact that we're born, the fact that God decides you're the Jewish people. I'm holding a mountain over your head and making you take on that status. So there's that aspect, and what we do. Again, those are we have our identity, but at the same time, obviously, there's more to a Jew than just being. There are things that we want to do, that we want to accomplish, that we view as being part of our mission in life. Those two aspects of our identity actually manifest themselves in two different forms of anti-Semitism. The first, let's go into what we do, right? That's something that's characterized primarily by Yavan, by the Syrian Greeks, by the enemies of the Hanukkah story. What Yavan wants is not that the Jewish people should all die, that they should all be eliminated. What was it?
They shouldn't be Jewish.
Be Hellenistic.
Right.
Right? Do like us. Stop being so frum. Stop being so Jewish. Stop keeping Kiddush HaChodesh, Shabbos, Mila. Stop doing all these things. Stop doing these things, and then you're part of our group, and we're happy to have you. And that's what Yavan wanted. That's what Yavan represented. They didn't want to destroy us for who we are, but for what we do. Who hates us for what we are, though? Any thoughts? Amalek. Very good. If you take a look, Amalek. If you take a look at source 7, you have a Medrash Tanchuma. So they point out that the wording is a little bit too wordy. Vayavo Amalek vayilachim im Yisrael. that Amalek came and they fought with the Jewish people. That word of coming, that implies a little bit more travel, I guess, than just a typical battle would be described as.
It's amazing because it presumes that Syria and Greek, the Syrians and the Greeks and the Amaleks understand the role of the Jews better than most Jews do.
It's definitely a sad truth to the world, is that some of our enemies know who we are better than we ourselves know. It's a truth. So Rabbi Nassan says, Maharei Seir Bo. Amalek came from the Seir mountains. V'halach arba meos parsa. They came 400 parsaos, parasangs in English, if that helps you at all. Ad she'agia l'Refidim, until they reached the Jews in Refidim. 400 parsaos is approximately a little bit over 1,000 miles.
So they had to go out of their way quite a bit.
They had to go out of their way quite a bit. That's like the distance
How
from...
do you know? Like, how does it...
How big a parsa is?
Yeah.
So the word parsa comes up in halacha very often in other categories also. So it's a measurement that we do have some idea of what it is. You have a machlokas between the Chazon Ish and Rav Naya about how exactly long it is, but they have a range. It would be between, like, let's say 900 and maybe 1,200 miles. I think that's the range that everybody can agree on. So this is very far away. This is the distance, I don't know, from Toronto to...
Closer than Florida.
To Winnipeg, let's say.
Oh.
Right?
That's pretty.
And you're living in a world where there are no cars. There's no, very swift methods of transportation.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty large journey. If you were to imagine, let's say, an Amaleki soldier speaking to his general before this war takes place. He says, General, I want to fight for my country. I love the Amaleki nation. I'm willing to represent them and even die in battle for them. These Jews that we're about to fight, are they a threat to our national security? The Amaleki general says, no. We're not part of the 7 Canaanite nations. We don't live in Israel. They're not coming to take our land. We're fine. Do they pose a threat to us by possibly aligning with our enemies? Maybe. No, they're not. They're not a threat in that regard either. Economically, are they a threat to us? No.
There was no encounter previously with Amalek?
No, not at all. This is the first one, right after the Jewish people are leaving Egypt.
They didn't know Jews before?
They didn't know Jews.
There was
They
no
didn't
Jewish
know
nation.
Jews.
We only existed. We existed in Egypt, but
They were 1,000 miles away. That's where they lived, their area?
yeah, that's what it seems like from this medrash.
What area is it today? Do you know?
The Seir Mountains are southeast of Israel.
Where, Jordan?
What country?
Saudi Arabia.
It's in,
Saudi
no,
Arabia.
not Saudi Arabia.
Sudan, Ethiopia. Sudan.
Southeast.
Sudan?
South-
No, east.
Oh, east.
I think maybe
Libya's east of Egypt.
That's west.
Oh, west, sorry.
No, I think
it's Saudi Arabia then.
maybe Jordan.
East.
I think it's in.
Pakistan.
I don't know how wide Jordan
Afghanistan.
goes. Afghanistan, something like that. Okay.
Somewhere around there.
Okay, somewhere around there.
And what day after Yetziat Mitzrayim they attacked?
No.
This is shortly before Har Sinai, so I would
Months
say
after they left Egypt.
Could be
They
side.
said
That was something around 30 days.
Could be bang.
No, China
Wait,
100,
it was
not 1,000.
way before Har Sinai, wasn't it? Was it shortly
No, wait.
after
This
you
is
left?
from our journey of leaving Egypt.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between leaving Egypt and getting to Har Sinai. So somewhere in the range of 1 to 50 days.
Because you think about that, it's like they walk very fast non-stop. Maybe they do 50 miles a day.
I'm not saying that they couldn't do it. They could do
No,
it,
but I mean,
but it's a
it's
very
like-
large journey to fight somebody that you don't
20,
really
10 days to get there. So it's like they left immediately when.
right.
They
mean,
had
well,
to see the
yeah, they had to
Jews.
leave right away.
Incredible. They didn't know any Jews before.
Yeah. Okay. So imagine this conversation between a soldier and his general. Sir, could I lose my life in this war? Yeah. Of course, it's a war. Why are we doing this? Why are we fighting these people? What do you think is the only answer a general could give? What do you think Amalek is after the Jewish people for? This is a nation that just began.
Well, they're going to kill us.
Well, they want to kill us, right? But why do they want to kill us?
No. Their claim can be that if we don't kill them, they'll kill us.
But we don't pose a threat. They're not living in Israel. They're not anywhere near us.
They represent a value system as opposed to us. That's often the explanation of why the Nazis
Sure.
hated the Jews. That they...
All right, you're finishing off the shir for me.
Oh, sorry.
But right, that's basically it. The Amalekim, they hated the Jewish people again because of who they are. The Jewish people.
They didn't know well enough. They were so far away in those days.
Enough they knew. I can tell you, they knew the following. They knew that there were miracles that were happening for the Jewish people that caused them to be liberated from Egypt.
Right.
Miracles that clearly showed that God was on their side.
Right.
That was enough. That was enough for Amalek. They realized the Jewish people were chosen by Hashem for a certain purpose in the world. There was an element of their identity, of who they are, that God did for them, to them. That was something that Amalek hated. That was something they couldn't stand.
Is it that though, or is it that if you're somebody that believes in murder and death, and somebody comes along and says, I represent a value system that's opposed to that?
I see those as one and the same. When you have a God who is just and fair and liberates the people who are treated so horribly, that is a large that is an announcement to the world that there is a system of morals that is external to what humans determine. And that itself, that ideology that's represented by the Jewish people being taken out of Egypt, that's something that Amalek hated, that they couldn't stand. And because of that, they actually went 1,000 miles plus.
So you call that jealousy, like, to an extent?
I wouldn't say jealousy, more of a difference in ideology that's so irreconcilable that they felt that they needed to kill us.
Just that they're so different from what they are.
Not just the hate of difference because it's different, but because it's going to lead to the world adopting a lifestyle and a value system that was totally against what Amalek wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Amalek, the founder of Amalek was a descendant of someone who had
Esau.
Interactions with Jews.
Oh, so that could be a
So
possibility
there you
too.
Go.
There's
but it was
some
a
familial
It
connection.
could have been the grandfather. This is it.
There could be some idea of what they represented even before they hear about all the
Not
miracles.
only represented someone who was intimately familiar with Jews.
For sure.
Then you could say
And you passed
maybe
it
it's
down.
jealousy. It's because he got shafted originally. So.
Yeah, but a jealousy because of what exactly? They have their nation. They're fine. What exactly is a Jew's success? How does that pose a threat to them in any way?
Well, if someone's been telling you, like for generations, that this is the bad people and they tricked me out of my blessing and all that, you're going to hate them. But you don't have to meet them to hate them.
If my great-grandfather told me
For sure.
that his brother stole blessings from him, I don't know if I'd be willing to go 1,000 miles to fight in a war with
If you
him.
repeat it enough, if it happens, you'd be surprised.
Okay, that's a possibility.
Like what they say about the Polish, that the hatred of Jews was like in the womb or something like that. There's something they say about Polish non-Jews that there was anti-Semitism.
That's coming from something.
The womb
We'd have to. I don't buy the from the womb thing. I would want more explanation. Anti-Semitism is a very complicated topic, but
well, no, I don't know. Now it makes sense.
just to say that there's an ingrained genetic
for sure.
anti-Semitic instinct. I don't know.
Not instinct, brainwashing, or you say.
Okay, brainwashing is something I buy, but then what is the brainwashing about? Let's get into it a little bit more. Just source 8, just to make the connection. We don't even need to do it inside. As you all know, Haman is from Amalek. Right? That's very clear from the beginning of the Megillah, and this Midrash points it out more explicitly that when Esther is being told by Mordechai through a messenger about what's going on, Mordechai even sends a little bit of a code to show that the Midah of Amalek, Karahu, of this idea that everything is coincidence, that there's no natural, there's no external moral code, that everything is just coincidence, that we're fighting, we're up against that kind of an enemy. This is this idea of hating the Jewish people because of who they are inherently is not something that you would be able to tell from Hitler's speeches or from even some of the books that he wrote, that this is the way he felt. Why is that not something he would make public? Because I hate the Jews because of just who they are.
Because at that point, people wouldn't buy into it.
Right. It's not a very PC message.
Yeah.
If you tell me that Jews do bad thing X, do bad thing Y, it might not be true. But if people, will buy into it, at least then that's something that they can go with. But we do have documentation after the fact that shows that there was a much more deeper-rooted hatred that Hitler had for the Jewish people. We have a few sources here. Hermann Rauschning, so he was a conservative governor, part of one of the political parties in Germany. He had aligned himself with Nazi Germany until he decided that he had had enough, and then he immigrated to America. He defected, and he made it his job, his mission in life to tell the world about how Hitler's motives were actually much more sinister than even he made them out to be.
He did this before the Holocaust?
I believe so. I believe so. Some call into question his validity as a source of what Hitler actually thought, so I have another source for you too. But just to look at source 9, he says, the struggle for world domination will be fought entirely between us, between Germans and Jews. All else is facade and illusion. Hitler understood that there was some kind of large battle going on between different kind of cultures, and that was what he was up against, and he saw the Jews as being the root of that. Many explain that where he was coming from was this idea similar to what we just used to describe Amalek, that there was a certain sense of conscience and appeal to an external moral code that the Jews represented, and that was something that Hitler felt was very much impeding the progress or the evolution socially of humankind. That if we're kind to each other and we don't allow for survival of the fittest, so to speak, so that's not the direction he felt the world should be going in. And he felt that the Jews were the greatest obstacle to, making sure that way of thinking went away. Just another one in source 10. So this is Robert Wistrich. He's a professor of the anti-Semitism department at Hebrew University. Yes, we have a department for that.
Really?
So
I never heard of this. Who wrote this Hitler's Apocalypse?
So this is Robert Wistrich. I don't know where he gets this quote from.
Yeah.
But you have something very interesting here. If only one country, for whatever reason, tolerates a Jewish family in it, that family will become the germ center for fresh sedition. If one little Jewish boy survives without any Jewish education, with no synagogue and no Hebrew school, Judaism is in his soul. Even if there had never been a synagogue or a Jewish school or an Old Testament, the Jewish spirit would still exist and exert its influence. It has been there from the beginning, and there is no Jew, not a single one, who does not personify it. This has nothing to do with education.
He's corroborating the Maharal there.
Yeah, definitely confirming the Maharal. There's no hatred here about what a Jew does. You could have a Jew that has absolutely no upbringing.
Doesn't even know he's Jewish.
He might not even. If he didn't even know he was Jewish, then that might be a harder thing to pin down. But
Hitler is saying it.
It's nothing about
Jews,
what you do.
Not we who are.
It's about who you are. Who you actually are. That is itself what bothered Hitler. And that's what Hitler was against. And again, it's because of this ideology of thinking that there were two ways of looking at the world. And Hitler felt that in order for his view of the world to win, he had to eliminate the root, which was the Jewish people, what they represented, just by being. Just from being people that had witnessed that Har Sinai, God speaking to them and saying that there's a moral code to the world that is not something that's determined by human beings. So again, if we were to talk about different kinds of anti-Semitism, what we're doing, so that's the Yavanist anti-Semitism. They're not out to kill us; they're just out to make us stop acting Jewish. And then you have the who we are kind of anti-Semitism that's personified by Amalek, that's personified by Haman. There's a very well-known chiluk, distinction that's made between how we celebrate the holidays of Hanukkah and Purim. How do we celebrate Hanukkah? What are the mitzvahs of Hanukkah?
Hidden in the home. You put the menorah out, or is it the other way around?
So there's menorah.
Purim is public. Wait a minute.
So not public-private. We do everything pretty publicly. There's Persumei Nisa by both, by the Megillah reading and by the menorah lighting. Publicizing the miracle. But in terms of Hanukkah,
one was our spiritual salvation, the other was our physical salvation.
Very good. That's the distinction that's made. The Levush is the first person that says this. In source 11, we're not going to do it inside, it's very long. But he points out, on Hanukkah, what are the mitzvahs that we're doing? Menorah, that's it, saying Hallel, praising God for the fact that we were saved. Is there anything that's Gashmi, that's physical, in the way we celebrate this holiday?
You're excluding eating things.
Yes. We're excluding eating things. As much as we like to eat sufganiyot and latkes, there's no chiyuv to do so. There's no chiyuv seuda. There's no obligation to have a meal. It's something that's nice, but it's not something that's obligatory. And the Levush says the reason why is because it was a spiritual war. The Yavanim, they wanted to stop us for what we were doing, not for who we are.
Right.
They didn't care about killing us. They just wanted us to be Hellenistic. Whereas on Purim, the holiday is about far more than spirituality. It's the most Gashmiistic holiday out there. What do?
Get drunk.
I didn't want to say it. But we eat a ton, right?
Yeah.
There's the Suda, which is...
It's about physical survival.
It's about physical
survival.
Right. So the Bush says it's about physical survival.
Friendship and gift.
Friendship, yes. Giving money to others.
Physical.
If you're giving food to show that friendship, yes. If you're giving money, that's also something that's physical. It's a lot more than just that idea. Oh, we had a physical threat, so therefore we celebrate physically. to take it to an extreme, I don't mean this in psak halacha in any way. Ask Rabbi Kropkin what to do with the whole drinking idea. But I'm sure you all have heard there is some element to drinking on Purim, right?
Sure.
Again, this discussion is devoid of halachic implications. Don't get drunk because of what I said.
Just
But
like eating and drinking. Right?
but the concept of being so involved in physicality might be meant to actually express the following idea. What did Amalek hate me for? Not for what I do, but for who I am. If I drink myself absolutely drunk, I can't do anything. I can't drive a car. Don't drive a car. I can't daven. If I'm a posek, I can't paskin halacha. If I'm a kohen, I can't duchen. I can't do anything when I'm drunk.
And they're still going to hate me.
And they're still going to hate me. And not that they're still going to, not just that they're still going to hate me, I'm still one of the chosen people.
Mm.
God said there's an aspect of me that is who I am, irrespective of what I do, and the way I show, or that you could show that that this idea that this is what Haman was after, that this is what Amalek was after, is by putting yourself in a position where you've really expressed the nafkamina, the practical application, as clearly and starkly as possible. Look, I can't do a thing, and still I have this aspect of my identity to me. That's what Haman hated, and that's what's still around and kicking and still chosen by God. That might be perhaps a little bit more of an insight as to why there's so much physical celebration on the holiday of Purim. Again, practically, halakha, ask your posek as to what to do, but this might be some insight as to why, even if I don't get into getting drunk, of why I'm being so physical. That might be an idea that's being expressed.
The Megillah ends with kimu v'kiblu, is to bring the spirituality back into the yontif, right, into the chag. Bring some spirituality back into the chag with kimu v'kiblu, right at the end. So it's not at the end of Purim, at the end of the Megillah. So it's not all a holiday of physicality. It's spirituality too.
But do I do anything that expresses that kimu v'kiblu at her? So
Megillah. Read the Megillah.
Can I
read the
read?
Megillah?
You tie the fancy dress into the physical.
Not off the top of my head. I didn't think
I
about
thought
it.
maybe you'd already given it some thought.
No, I hadn't. But
So,
to come back to the Kafalem Harkegigis, let's come back to that original Gemara that we asked. Why? What changed in the Purim story that all of a sudden we realized that we want to accept the Torah willingly? It might be that all of a sudden in the middle of the Purim story we are exposed to a threat that we hadn't faced yet before. Somebody that wants to kill us, irrespective of what we do. Wants to kill us because of who we are. Right? All Jews, there were no distinctions made between what you did, whether you were a firm Jew or whether you were an assimilated Jew that went to the party or didn't go to the party. Everybody was a target. And that itself reminded the Jewish people that there was an element of their identity that they couldn't get rid of. Even when they assimilate, even when they go to the party, there's something that they can't remove from themselves. Now, that might build up resentment at first, but if that's what ultimately brings them to a point of a spiritual awakening, has happened in the Purim story, then they might have an enlightened moment where they realize, wait a second, that mountain being held over our parents' heads way back when at Har Sinai, that wasn't to shove the Torah down our throats because it wasn't something that was really good for us. But that was God's way of doing what the Maharal said, is actually infusing within us an aspect of our identity that we wouldn't be able to get rid of. And because of that, that itself was what helped us have our spiritual awakening. And it's what showed us most clearly that God is making a loud and clear statement. Whatever you do, no matter what, no matter how assimilated you are, no matter where you go, no matter how little you do, how little you live as a Jew, you're still my chosen nation, you're still my children, I still love you. That's a moment where the Jewish people can have an epiphany and they realize, wait, back at Har Sinai, we do want that. We want that willingly. We want that aspect of our identity that got infused in us, and we never meant that it should be taken through coercion. We never thought of it as being something which was just being forced against our will that we never really want.